Kia ora tātou. The Ngāti Porou, prophet Ngāti Porou and iwi on the east coast of New Zealand, the poet Michael Tamahiri, he writes this blessing. As stillness in Pounamu to silence is wed, may solitude foster your truth in word. As the hour flows in ideal sequence, may your soul reveal where time is presence. As whenua anchors the rako in light and wind, may your outer life grow from peace within. This prayer is densely woven, and it's worthwhile identifying and thinking about its threads. As stillness in Pounamu to silence is wed, may solitude foster your truth in word. It begins in stillness, the stillness in a greenstone, Pounamu. Greenstone has long been regarded as tapu, sacred, and to wear a Pounamu, the tapu must be lifted by a simple karakia prayer. Tapu is about right relationships, including how the human world intersects with the world of nature. A prayer over a Pounamu recognizes this and challenges the subject-object divide, namely human subject versus nature-object divide. The divide that is so prevalent and destructive in the Western world. So Michael's prayer begins with sitting, looking into and finding the stillness in this tonga treasure called greenstone. This stillness is wed to and intimately connected to silence. Like most meditation practices, we need to start by stilling the noises of our minds, our anxieties, our tongues, and other devices. This weave of stillness and silence is deeply personal. No one else can do it for us. Thus, even if done where others are present, like in a church or meditation retreat, it is a practice of solitude. The first stanza concludes that our spoken truth, that is one's own truth, rather than God's truth or the church's truth or your family's truth, but your own truth, is fostered, nurtured by this trinity of solitude, stillness, and silence. Note too, there are many ways that truth is known and shared, and spoken language is just one of those ways, and can be the most unreliable. As the hour flows in ideal sequence, may your soul reveal where time is presence. This stanza takes us to the river, Awa, and how it flows from high in the hills, down through streams, over rocks, round trees, joining with other streams, expanding, and finally making it to the coast. All in its own ideal sequence, each hour unique, each offering a presence. The second line calls on our soul to recognize where time is presence, which means reconsidering what we mean by time. Like the Greek differentiation between chronos, chronological time, and kairos, a moment in time. There is a way of offering presence rather than just being present. When we offer our presence, kairos, when we discover presence, it is as if the clocks have stopped. The poem implicitly asks, where does this happen? And it answers, your soul will know it when it perceives it and will reveal it to you. The soul both knows and is nurtured by deep presence. When the noises of self-preoccupation, busyness, ambition, including our need to be noticed and affirmed, when these are muted or for a moment forgotten. And the last stanza, as Whenua anchors the rako in light and wind, may your outer life grow from peace within. Whenua is usually translated as land, as in tangata whenua, people of the land. But it can also mean placenta. So it's a word that points to the intimate connection between people and the earth, again challenging that subject-object divide. In this context of land anchoring a tree, rako, in light and wind, Whenua might be pointing to the pattern of relationships, past and present, that hold us and ground us. Relationships of blood and birth, relationships of sustenance and nurture, and if we're lucky, of mentoring and healing. Michael Tamahiri's prayer is that as the tree is held by the whenua, so our outer life, our relationships, physical presence, comings and goings, doings and beings, are held and sustained by peace within. It infers that the whenua, both physical ground and relationships, offer us a secure, sustaining peace, a grounding if we let them. The search for inner peace can be one where we have both arrived and still on the journey at the same time. It usually is a search that is woven into relationships, both trying to separate ourselves from the not-so-good situations and memories, and trying to reconcile some of that, and holding on to the good and healthy, and offering goodness and health to others. Inner peace takes some work. Inner peace is also usually a search, as this poem indicates, that is woven into our relationship with the land, rocks and rivers, indeed all organic and inorganic presence. It also asks a question of us. Where do we find our peace within? And how do we feed it? Proverbs 29:18 says, where there is no vision, the people perish. So says the King James Version. It's oft quoted, including being inscribed in the pulpit of the church here. But as with many things in the King James translation, it's wise to look again at the Hebrew text. The word vision has a sense of listening to God, seeing with God's eyes, rather than our modern idea of having a goal or direction. So it's about being immersed in God, being in God, rather than having or following a plan. The long-sightedness symbolized by the eagle is not so much about a path to travel down, but a wisdom of being and listening to, noticing God, who is in all and through all. And the word perish has a sense of getting lost and forgetting or missing the boundary markers. Those boundary markers might be thought of questions like, does what we're saying or doing build people up? Is it kind and loving? Even if it's true, does it need to be said? And these boundary markers, these guides for us, are the result of deep listening as individuals and a community to the divine energy of presence, God, which is forever loving and forgiving. In my progressive understanding of the Christian faith, I don't think of God as a being like a superhuman who thinks, plans, and gives instructions. Rather, the word God approximates the word love in its best sense. By best sense, I mean the love that seeks to include when we too often exclude. The love that sits lightly to possessions and pretentiousness. The love that prioritizes the vulnerable and suffering. And the love that in its embrace holds and values equity and equality. So, listening to God is listening with our ears and hearts to what this best sense of love might be saying. And sometimes we don't hear until we start doing, engaging with this love, namely including, letting go, caring for those in need, making justice. Today, the closest Sunday to October the 4th, we remember St. Francis, that 12th century Italian privileged rich man who shared his riches and privileges as well as he could in order to live more simply, listen to the simple, care for those deemed of little account, including animals, and in so doing hear the God of simplicity. Unlike most medieval saints, Francis has travelled well into the 21st century, still having a message that resonates. In one famous story, Francis preached to hundreds of birds about being thankful to God for their wonderful clothes, for their independence, and for God's care. The legend tells us the birds stood still as he walked among them, often flying off when he said they could leave, only flying off when he said they could leave. Of course, this rendition has been shaped by the storytellers who weren't Francis. They were probably his followers. And they probably, in line with our gospel reading today, wanted him to instruct, preach to the birds about thankfulness and giving praise to a supreme being God. So the followers passed it down and wrote it up in a particular way. I think we can take the liberty of interpreting this Francis encounter, if it is at all historical, in a different way. I'm aided by the painting of John August Swanson, who, unlike the traditional pictures of the scene with Francis pointing a finger, as if to make a preacher's point, in Swanson's work, Francis is feeding the birds. No wonder they stayed around. And Francis is enjoying feeding them. Indeed, I like to think he's finding some inner peace in feeding them. Rather than a traditional understanding of Francis preaching the Word of God to them, I would want to reimagine preaching and Word of God. For I understand both those words differently than many Christians. In this context, preaching is more akin to listening, or in Mary Oliver's words, noticing, or Rabbi Abraham Heschel's words, being amazed. And the Word, far from being audible or written words, is more akin to a life spark. So preaching the Word is about listening to and for that life spark, and then by actions and, if necessary, words, conveying something of it to others. Which leads me back to what I was saying about vision in the book of Proverbs and Michael Tamahere's poem. Listening to God, being in God, seeing with the eyes and heart of God. It's not just about stillness and solitude and a quest for our own truth and inner peace. Being in God is about engagement with people, with birds, with greenstone, indeed all the natural world. Engagement reveals to us presence. Engagement, as well as stillness, takes us into the purposes and practices and peace of God. Blessings to you this week.